A man rides into a city, not on a war horse, not in golden armor, but on a simple donkey. Crowds rush to see him. Voices cry out, branches wave in the air, cloaks are laid on the road. To many, it looked like the beginning of a revolution, the arrival of a king. But to others, it was a sign of something far deeper, something hidden beneath the cheers and the noise. Was this moment the Jerusalem was alive with energy? The streets were crowded because it was Passover, the great feast when Jewish families traveled from far away to remember how God had once rescued them from Egypt. Hope filled the air. People longed for freedom again, but this time from Roman rule. Every eye was watching, every heart was expecting. And into this tension, Jesus came riding. Not as a soldier, not as a king with banners, but as a servant on a donkey. This was no accident. This was the ancient prophecy from the prophet Zechariah coming to life before their eyes. See, your king comes to you gentle and riding on a donkey. Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He was not avoiding attention. He was stepping straight into it. The crowd recognized the moment. They cut palm branches, a symbol of victory and joy. They laid their cloaks on the ground, as if to roll out a royal carpet. Their voices rose with a single cry, Hosanna! It was not just a shout of praise. It was a desperate plea that meant, save us now. They believed salvation had arrived. They thought the long wait for a Messiah, a deliverer, was finally over. Their king was here, and their king would surely overthrow their enemies. It was noise, it was movement, it was fire in their hearts. Children shouted, men and women sang. The city shook with expectation. But beneath the noise, there was a different sound. Jesus was silent. His face carried both determination and sorrow. He saw what others did not see. He saw the joy of the moment, but also the suffering to come. As he moved slowly through the streets, he was not fooled by the cheering. He knew that the same city that celebrated him today would cry for his blood only days later. Yet he did not turn back. He did not avoid the path. Every step of that donkey's hooves was a step closer to the cross. This is the scene that begins the story. A city waiting for a king. A crowd shouting for victory. A man moving forward, not toward a throne, but toward sacrifice. The triumphal entry was not a mistake. It was not a misunderstanding. It was the perfect unfolding of God's plan. A plan that seemed confusing to the people in the moment, but a plan that would soon change history forever. Imagine standing in that crowd. The air is heavy with dust and song. Children are running with palm branches, their laughter cutting through the roar of voices. Old men who had seen many Passovers lift their arms high, tears streaming down their faces. Women press forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the man riding the donkey. The shout echoes from every corner, Hosanna! Save us now! To the people of Jerusalem, this was not just a parade. This was a dream finally breaking into reality. For years, they had lived under the crushing weight of Roman rule. Soldiers patrolled their streets, taxes drained their pockets. Their freedom seemed lost. But now here was a man who healed the blind, who made the lame walk, who even raised the dead. If he could command storms, surely he could command armies. If he could break the power of sickness, surely he could break the power of Rome. To the people, this was victory already. It was triumph before the battle was even fought. They saw prophecy unfolding in front of them. Generations had whispered of a Messiah, a promised king who would rise from the line of David. They knew the ancient songs. They remembered the words of the prophets. And as Jesus rode through the city, it felt like history itself was bowing down. The donkey was not a weakness. It was a symbol of peace, the sign of a king who came not to destroy, but to bless. To those who had eyes to see, this was glory. This was God keeping his promise. Every cloak on the road was an offering. Every palm waved was a banner of victory. Every cry of Hosanna was the heartbeat of a nation that believed its deliverer had come. In that moment, Jesus was lifted higher than any rabbi, higher than any prophet, higher than any king. To the crowd, this was the greatest triumph they had ever seen. Yet what made it even more powerful was that Jesus accepted their praise. He did not silence them. When the Pharisees told him to rebuke the crowd, He replied that if they kept quiet, the very stones would cry out. Creation itself could not stay silent in the face of this moment. The universe knew what was happening. Heaven and earth recognized the true king had arrived. It was triumph not in the way of soldiers and swords, but in the way of prophecy and truth. It was triumph not for a nation only, but for all people. In this entry, Jesus was not just being welcomed into a city. He was being declared as the Savior of the world. The voices of the crowd did not realize how true their words were. Hosanna! Save us now! That is exactly what he came to do. The same voices that shouted Hosanna would soon twist into a darker cry. What began with branches waving in celebration would end with fists raised in anger. That is the tragedy hidden inside the triumph. The people welcomed a king, but they did not understand the kind of king he truly was. They longed for a warrior to overthrow Rome. They wanted a crown of gold, not a crown of thorns. They dreamed of freedom from soldiers, not freedom from sin. Their hopes were high, but their vision was small. Jesus knew this. As he rode into Jerusalem, he did not only hear their cheers, he also heard the echo of another sound only days away. The sound of nails being hammered into wood. The sound of his own name being shouted in hatred. Crucify him! Crucify him! That is why, in the middle of the celebration, he wept. Looking over the city, he cried not because the crowd was too small, but because their hearts were too blind. He knew they did not see the truth. He knew the city itself would one day be torn down, every stone of the temple destroyed. And still, he rode on. The tragedy was not only in their misunderstanding. It was in their betrayal. The people who waved palm branches would soon turn their backs. The disciples who swore loyalty would soon scatter in fear. One of his closest followers would sell him for silver. Another would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. The joy of Palm Sunday was a fragile flame that could not survive the storm of the coming week. Even the leaders of the city turned the moment into tragedy. Instead of seeing prophecy fulfilled, they saw a threat to their power. Instead of celebrating the Messiah, they plotted to kill him. Their whispers in the shadows grew louder until the plan was sealed. The triumphal entry for them was not a moment of worship. It was the moment they decided he had to die. The most painful tragedy was this. Jesus had come to bring peace, but they rejected it. He had come to give life, but they chose death. He had come to offer love, but they answered with hate. To the human eye, the story seems broken. How could such a moment of joy turn so quickly into sorrow? Yet Jesus walked straight into it, knowing the cost, knowing the pain, but refusing to stop. The triumphal entry was the opening scene of his final act. The tragedy was not that he entered the city. The tragedy was that the city did not truly recognize who he was. They saw a king, but not the King of Kings. They wanted victory, but not the victory he came to give. And because of that, the cheers of Hosanna would soon be drowned out by the cry for his blood. From the outside, it looked like a king's parade. From the inside, it felt like a funeral march. Jesus was not carried by the shouts of the people. He was carried by the weight of his mission. Every step forward on that donkey was a step deeper into surrender. The crowd saw victory, but he saw the cross. They saw freedom from Rome, but he saw nails, wood, and blood. They expected a throne, but he knew his throne would first be a hill called Calvary. Imagine his eyes that day. He looked at the faces smiling at him, and he loved them. He looked at the children singing, and he blessed them. Yet behind each joyful face, he saw the brokenness of sin. He saw what no one else could see. He saw the lies whispered into hearts, the chains wrapped around souls, the darkness waiting to destroy. His vision was not limited to the city gates or the temple walls. He carried the weight of eternity. He knew the only way to break the power of sin was not through armies or revolts, but through sacrifice. He had spoken of it before. The Son of Man must suffer. The shepherd must lay down his life for the sheep. But in the noise of celebration, no one heard those words. They only heard what they wanted: victory now. Jesus, however, saw both the tragedy of rejection and the triumph hidden within it. He saw beyond the cross to the empty tomb. He saw beyond the pain to the resurrection morning. His heart was torn, yet steady. This is why he did not turn back. He could have stayed away from Jerusalem. He could have avoided the city, escaped the betrayal, escaped the suffering. But love does not escape. Love steps forward. Love does not run from pain. Love embraces it to save the beloved. Jesus' own view of that day was not about himself. It was about the world he came to save. He felt the weight of sorrow but carried it with purpose. He heard the cheers but did not cling to them. He knew the cross would strip him of all human honor, but he also knew it would unlock eternal glory. To his heart, the triumph was not the palm branches or the shouts of Hosanna. The real triumph was obedience, the unshakable choice to fulfill his Father's will, no matter the cost, height of victory or the start of sorrow. When Jesus looked at Jerusalem, he saw both tragedy and triumph fused together. He knew one could not exist without the other. The sorrow of rejection would lead to the joy of salvation. The death of the cross would lead to the victory of the resurrection. His own view was not blinded by the noise of the crowd. It was fixed on the purpose of God. And that is why he rode on, steady, unshaken, and willing to pay the price. Was it triumph, or was it tragedy? To the eyes of men, it looked like failure. A king welcomed with cheers but soon abandoned to die. A Messiah rejected by the very people who prayed for his coming. A teacher betrayed by his own followers. Everything about the cross looked tragic. Yet, in the hands of God, tragedy became the very doorway to triumph. The story of Jesus cannot be read through one lens alone. If you see only the palm branches, you miss the shadow of the cross. If you see only the cross, you miss the dawn of the resurrection. They are not separate stories. They are one. The triumphal entry was never meant to end at the city gates. It was meant to lead to the Garden of Gethsemane, to the courtroom of Pilate, to the hill of Golgotha, and finally, to the empty tomb. What seemed like defeat was actually the greatest victory in history. Think of it this way. The cheers of the crowd lasted a moment, but the salvation Jesus won lasts forever. The cross was wood and nails, but it became the key that unlocked freedom for every soul. The crown of thorns was sharp and cruel, but through it came a crown of eternal glory. What looked like shame became honor. What looked like weakness became strength. What looked like the end became the beginning of life for all who believe. This is the mystery at the heart of the gospel. God takes what seems tragic and transforms it into triumph. Death is swallowed up in victory. Darkness is broken by light. Sin is overcome by grace. In the world's story, tragedy ends with loss. In God's story, tragedy ends with resurrection. That is why the triumphal entry can never be called only one or the other. It is both. It is joy and sorrow, glory and grief, laughter and tears, woven together by the love of God. The people could not see it at the time. To them, the week ended in despair. But heaven saw the bigger picture. Angels watched as every prophecy unfolded with precision. The Father watched as his Son chose obedience over escape. What seemed like tragedy to the world was triumph to the throne of God. The answer, then, is not triumph or tragedy. It is triumph through tragedy. The very path of suffering became the road to salvation. And that is the story of Jesus, a king who chose to win by laying down his life. The crowd saw only the surface. They wanted freedom from Rome. They wanted a kingdom they could touch with their hands, walls they could see with their eyes, a throne they could bow before in the temple courts. But Jesus offered something deeper. He came to break chains no army could break. He came to tear down walls no human eye could see. His kingdom was not built with stone and wood, but with grace and truth. And so we come back to the question, was it triumph or was it tragedy? The answer does not only belong to history, it belongs to you. When you look at Jesus, what do you see? Do you see only a man rejected, betrayed, and nailed to a cross? Do you see only tragedy? Or do you see the love that carried him forward? The love that turned death into life? The love that makes the cross shine brighter than any crown of gold? Every generation faces the same choice the crowd faced that day. Some cheer Jesus when he seems to give them what they want, but turn away when he asks for surrender. Some wave their branches in joy, but later deny him when the cost is too high. Others see beyond the noise. They see not just the donkey, not just the palm branches, not just the cross, but the empty tomb. They see the triumph hidden inside the tragedy, and they choose to follow him. The triumphal entry is not just a story of the past, it is a mirror held up to us in the present. It asks us, will you see Jesus only as a king of your own desires? Or will you see him as the king who gives what you truly need? Will you follow him only in the cheers of the crowd, or also in the silence of the cross? The tragedy of rejection still exists whenever hearts turn away from him. But the triumph still lives whenever even one heart bows in faith. What happened in Jerusalem is happening still. The call of Jesus to save, the chance to believe, the decision between fading cheers and eternal hope. So the question remains, not just for that city long ago, but for every listener today. When you see Jesus, will you stop at the tragedy, or will you walk through it into the triumph?